Richardson, and I support this message. I'm currently looking for phone companies to work with regulations, developing a system for web regulations, website regulations, using facial recognition tracking, name recognition tracking, voice recognition tracking, and content recognition tracking to create a blurry face filter and a mute filter, and also a blur out people's name if they're being mentioned in a one-sided story, because people have the rights to represent themselves, but when they go into mentioning other people in a one-sided story or things along those lines, that's a defamation of character, where they're using them as a form of entertainment and not getting their consent or a compensation contract where they get royalties for being mentioned or things along those lines. It's kind of like being like, unpaid worker where they're using your voice. Also, problems with videos and recordings is, people act accordingly to their audience, and in the comfort of a friend and maybe someone that's partially a friend but being recorded, they might be a little silly, they might be drunk or disoriented or cranky, they might have just woke up or things along those lines. And by being in a video, they're now potentially being projected to potentially millions of people that weren't physically present and things along those lines, which is a misrepresentation because people act accordingly to their audience, and also are people who are entitled, royalties and permission, like to get consent to be in a video and things along those lines. Now, by putting this system in place using the facial recognition tracking and the voice and name recognition tracking, this will help stop defamation of character and people being used as unconsenting, uncompensated forms of entertainment. Now, people still have the freedom of speech. If they want to represent themselves with their freedom of speech, that is one thing. But when you step over the lines where you go from representing yourself to representing someone else, that's when you're crossing into the line of defamation of character and also theft of entertainment value and things along those lines, and using people as propaganda and things along those lines. And if we can put this system in place with regulations, and when someone was to upload a video, if someone was behind me, they would be blurred out and things along those lines. So then I wouldn't be stealing their entertainment value, or maybe they're in a bad picture. The other thing with videos is relevance, where someone could be a non-consenting, non-compensated person in a picture or video on their bad hair day, and then they get their hair done, and now their hair is fleek, their hair is looking good, they just got their hair cut, but now they're being displayed, and it's not relevant, where just yesterday they had a bad haircut and they got it fixed up, now their hair is fine, and it's a misrepresentation to their current looks and things along those lines and how they want to represent themselves. That's why putting these regulations in place where phones are in compliance and have these filters where non-consenting parties are blurred out while posted on social media platforms or websites or things along those lines. And then on top of that, these app companies and social media sites need to stop cutting corners and sublet space, maybe at a phone provider store, and hire lawyers to have parent consent forms with simple and to the point terms, not like a trillion page demon contract or things along those lines. And then, on top of that, the parent consent forms, and then consent forms for other people that maybe be adults or things along those lines. And then the terms, are legal terms. It's not like, by signing this paper, we can kill you or we can steal your information out of your phone or things along those lines. If anything, that's not a legal contract. There's been a doctor that's been prosecuted for murder, for having a contract where he thought he could kill people if they sign a piece of paper, and that was proven that he was guilty in the court of law for murder. And just because you have a contract doesn't mean you can make someone a victim of a law and not be liable for the consequences and things along those lines. And they need to make these regulations and stop cutting corners and maybe sublet space and maybe pool their money together to hire one lawyer at each subletted space. That way it's not one company going out of pocket. Instead, it's like a whole bunch of these companies pooling their money together for lawyers because they probably already have lawyers hired in the first place. So if they pooled their money all together to hire lawyers to legally sign people up with a consent form where there's two people of the person's choice uh, to be witnesses, ID checks, sobriety checks. Someone might sign a contract under the influence of alcohol or marijuana, which is now legalized. And, that might not be a legal contract because they were not in the right state of mind to make those decisions or things along those lines. Also, children need parents' consent because they're, don't have the full mental capacity or wisdom to know what to sign and what not to sign. Also, each term should be read to them in the language they speak and presented to them. And then each term is read one at a time. And then they initial the term and they either agree or disagree. And then the next uh, term is read to them, and then they initial, and then agree or disagree, and then they would get a copy. The two witnesses of their choice would get a copy. The lawyer signing them up would get a copy, and the website would get a copy. And then maybe these subletted spaces, people if they have a video with people that all are consenting parties. Maybe they can, have, a contract written up for them for, they all go there to prove their consent or things along those lines or their royalty contract. And maybe, that can save these apps more money where then people can stream a video and be entitled to advertising revenue, and then all the parties involved are getting equal shares or whatever their agreed terms are and things along those lines. This is Matthew William Parkinson, and I support this message. It's been a splendid evening. I hope you take this and use it for good. And it's been a splendid evening. I must now retire to my quarters.